When we think about military command, we usually picture maps, troop movements, and big battlefield tactics. But what happens when the biggest threat you're facing isn't the enemy in front of you, but the chaos brewing within your own ranks? We're about to dive into this incredible campaign from 10th century North Africa that really shows what leadership looks like under the most extreme pressure.
I mean, seriously? Think about this question. This is exactly what our main guy had to figure out. It's pretty much a commander's worst nightmare, right? You're fighting for a cause you believe in, but you literally can't trust your own army. This isn't just about winning battles anymore. It's about somehow holding everything together.
All right, so let's meet our commander, a man named Abu Abdallah. He's leading this massive rebellion against the established ruler. But on top of all that, he's also fighting a very personal battle, a chronic, painful illness. So just imagine trying to run a war while you're physically suffering. It just adds this whole other layer of difficulty to everything he's trying to do. And when you look at the two leaders, they could not be more different. On one side, you've got our challenger, Abu Abdallah. He's principled, but he's sick, and he just can't seem to get his own troops under control. And on the other side, you have the ruler, Ziyādat Allāh. He's got all the power of the state behind him, and his most powerful weapon, well, it isn't really his army. It's his total control over information. This guy is an absolute master of propaganda. So, this brings us to the first huge crisis of the campaign, the siege of a town called Maydara. And what happens here isn't some glorious battle. Oh no, it's an incident that perfectly exposes that internal war Abu Abdallah is fighting against his own forces.
So here's the play-by-play. The town of Maydara basically offers to surrender peacefully. Abu Abdallah's troops promise them safety. But the second the gates open, they break that promise and just start plundering the town. Abu Abdallah is absolutely horrified. He tries to make them return the stolen goods, but, the damage is done. And you better believe his rival, Ziyādat Allāh, immediately jumps on this, using it as propaganda to paint him as this horrible monster.
And this quote, it just says it all. The historical source says he was extremely saddened, which really shows you his personal sense of failure here. He wants to punish the guys who did it, but they've just vanished back into the army. He's a leader who has completely lost control, and that failure has now become a powerful weapon for his enemy. Okay, so after the total disaster at Maydara, the two armies finally meet for their first real head-to-head battle. But what actually happens on the field is almost less important than the story that gets told about it afterwards. This becomes a battle for perception, a war of spin. So, here's the most important thing to know. The actual outcome of the battle was nothing. It was a tie. It was messy, it was inconclusive, and when night fell, both sides just packed up and went home. Nobody won, nobody lost. A draw. That's the objective reality of what happened. But that is not the story that was told. Not even close. Ziyādat Allāh's commander writes back to the capital and completely makes up a story about a huge, glorious victory. Then Ziyādat Allāh takes that lie and pumps it up even more, sending out these grand proclamations to be read in mosques all over the country. He uses this fake news to rebuild his own reputation, which had been taking a hit. He basically lost on the battlefield, but he absolutely won the information war. Now, beyond the actual fighting and the war of words, there was a whole third front to this war, the super complicated, shifting loyalties of all the local tribes. Winning them over or punishing them for betrayal was just as crucial as any direct fight. It was a whole different kind of battlefield.
Yeah, this whole situation with the local tribes was a real mess. Some of them, like the Banū Washnū and the Banū Mājin, they just straight up defected to the enemy. Abu Abdallah's response to that was swift and brutal. He sent forces to crush them. But then you have the Banū Wardim, who stayed loyal, and his response to them, well, that shows a totally different and way more clever side of his leadership. So here's the puzzle he's facing. The enemy army is marching to attack his loyal allies, the Banū Wardim. He has to help them, but his main army is tied up somewhere else. He can't afford to split his forces. He can't risk a major battle. So what do?
He sends just 500 horsemen. That's it. Not an army, not a force that could possibly win a real battle on its own. It's this calculated, almost symbolic gesture, a tiny force against a much bigger enemy army. On paper, it looks like a suicide mission. And this is the brilliant part. He gives these 500 horsemen the absolutely strangest order you could imagine. He tells them not to fight.
He just says, march to that mountain over there, set up camp where the Banū Wardim can see you, and just watch. That's the entire plan. Just watch. The effect was purely psychological, but wow, was it effective. Seeing Abu Abdullah's banners up on that mountain, the Bani Ward's morale just skyrocketed. They knew they weren't alone, and they got so fired up by this show of support that they launched their own ferocious attack on the enemy. And, against all odds, they won. Abu Abdullah got a major victory through a proxy without risking his main army. It was an absolute masterstroke of psychological warfare.
So when you step back and pull all these different threads together, you see that Abu Abdullah's campaign wasn't just one simple war. It was this constant, incredibly complex balancing act. This was the true test of what it really means to be a commander. He was fighting a two-front war the whole time. The external war, that's the obvious one, the clash of armies against his rivals, Ziyādat Allāh. But the internal war was arguably the harder one. He had to fight against his own men's indiscipline, he had to play this treacherous game of tribal alliances, and he had to fight a relentless propaganda machine that could turn a stalemate into a crushing defeat overnight. So this story from the 10th century, about this brilliant military mind who's constantly being undermined by his own side and is just losing the information war, it leaves us with a really critical question. What's the true measure of a commander? Is it about controlling the battlefield? Or is it about controlling the narrative and winning the hearts and minds of your own people?